When the horse vanishes into the trees, the whole village reacts as if fate itself had delivered a personal blow. People rush in with their own fears, assumptions, and rushed conclusions, certain that something disastrous has taken place. Nothing feels quiet. Everything is judgment and noise. Meanwhile, the farmer stands before the empty space the horse left behind, watching the wind move through the yard. He doesn't resist the moment or bargain with it. He simply accepts it as it arrives without panic or ornament. The neighbors whisper that this is a terrible loss, repeating it as if the universe had taken something essential from the farmer's life. They speak with certainty, conditioned to label everything instantly as tragedy, failure, or punishment. But the old man doesn't allow himself to be swept into the emotional tide rising around him. With the calm of someone who's seen the world turn 1,000 unpredictable ways, he knows he can't guess the ending of what has just begun. So he offers a short, simple reply, one almost carried by the breeze. Maybe. That maybe lands strangely in the village, unsettling those who expected despair or anger. To some, it sounds like apathy. To others, a refusal to face reality. But the farmer doesn't speak to satisfy expectations. His wisdom flows from a place that doesn't rely on anyone's approval. He knows first impressions rarely reveal the whole truth. Every event carries hidden layers that unfold slowly, like seeds needing silence before they're ready to sprout. And so his answer isn't doubt, it's understanding. While the neighbors insist on marking that day as the beginning of misfortune, the old man remains steady, absorbing the event without fear or hope. His serenity isn't ignorance, it's perception. He sees life not as isolated happenings, but as a continuous, shifting dance between the visible and the invisible. That's why he won't define what hasn't truly formed yet. His maybe becomes a doorway to possibilities no one else has the patience to consider. In this way, the very first moment reveals the heart of the parable. The human impulse to judge too soon is what steals our peace. The village embodies the urgency to call everything good or bad, blessing or disaster, without waiting for life to unfold. The farmer represents the Taoist truth that wisdom lives in watching, not rushing, in listening rather than assuming. Nothing is entirely good or entirely bad at the moment it happens. And realizing this changes the way we move through the world. The very next morning, before the dust of yesterday's worries has even settled, the horse returns, and it's not alone this time. 2 wild horses follow closely behind, snorting, powerful, untamed, as if they had chosen the farmer's land as their new refuge. The village gathers again, but now their voices overflow with excitement. Instead of fear, what they had once branded as misfortune suddenly looks like a twist of incredible luck. And they celebrate this miracle with the same intensity with which they had lamented the disaster. The neighbors rush to the farmer, praising his fortune, as if life had finally corrected its own mistake. Their joy is loud, exaggerated, almost desperate, because they crave meaning in every fluctuation of fate. Yet the old man doesn't dance with their enthusiasm, or step into their emotional roller coaster. He watches the animals quietly, reading not the surface of events, but the deeper rhythm beneath them. And just as calm as before, he repeats the same soft answer. Maybe. This second maybe confuses the crowd even more than the first. How could a man receive a blessing and not burst into gratitude? How could someone gain so much in one day and still speak with such neutrality? To them, neutrality looks like indifference, but they don't understand that the farmer isn't refusing joy. He's simply refusing the illusion of control. For him, what looks like gain today may turn into loss tomorrow, and what seems like chaos may be quietly aligning something greater. To the Taoist heart, the truth is simple. Life doesn't reveal its final shape. In isolated snapshots, it flows, bends, shifts. It hides beauty inside hardship, and hides challenge inside blessing. The world, however, insists on immediate definitions, because uncertainty scares us. That's why the neighbors react so quickly, clinging to labels, to avoid the discomfort of not knowing. But the farmer stands outside that impulse, living in the present moment. without forcing conclusions that don't belong to him. And so while the village celebrates what they believe to be a sudden stroke of luck, the old man remains anchored in the middle path, not denying the blessing but not clinging to it either. His serenity isn't coldness, it's freedom. He reminds us, without preaching, that the truth of any event unfolds with time, not with impulse. The unexpected return of the horses becomes another lesson. The world is always rearranging itself, and our peace depends on resisting the temptation to judge its movements too fast. It's in this atmosphere of excitement and uncertainty that the young man steps forward, his eyes lit with renewed hope. The return of the horses feels, to him, like the universe finally opening, a door that had remained closed for too long. He touches one of the animals gently, imagining what possibilities this new turn of fate might bring to their home. His heart races in a way it hasn't in a long time, filled with the belief that life is finally shifting in their favor. And while the village encourages his enthusiasm, the old man observes him with a tenderness that holds both love and caution. He knows that every rise carries its shadow, and every good fortune also demands wisdom. Still, he doesn't interfere, because the Tao teaches that each soul must walk through its own part of the unfolding. And as the young man stands there, dreaming of what comes next, the old man once again quietly murmurs, "Maybe." The excitement in the village barely has time to breathe before everything shifts again. The young man, still glowing with the hope that the returning horses might finally change their lives, decides to tame one of them. He walks toward the animal with brave determination, convinced that fortune is finally turning their way. But in a single brutal instant, the promise dissolves. The horse rears up violently and throws him to the ground. With devastating force, his cry cuts through the air like a blade, and the joy that had filled the village just moments before collapses into a suffocating silence, as if the universe had suddenly snapped the thread of hope they were holding. Within seconds, the village rushes to the scene, carrying the same urgency with which they always rush to declare what something must mean. They crowd around with dramatic conclusions, voices rising in panicked unison, whispers flaring like old superstitions awakened from sleep. These horses brought bad omens. They carried a shadow with them. We should have known nothing good comes without a price. Their fear spreads quickly, fueled not by reason, but by the belief that fortune always hides a curse. And so the broken leg becomes more than an accident. It becomes, in their eyes, proof that the horses returned carrying something dark attached to them. Yet while the village drowns in its need to judge, the old man remains steady, grounded, and impossibly calm. He kneels beside his injured son, offering comfort without losing himself. In the chaos spiraling around them, his hands are steady, his breath slow, his gaze anchored in something far beyond the surface of the moment. When the villagers demand that he curse the day, declare the accident a tragedy, or agree that fate has turned cruel again, he meets their desperation with the same gentle answer. He always gives, "Maybe." The word unsettles them more than the injury itself, as if neutrality in the face of pain were a kind of heresy. To the village, his restraint feels cold, almost impossible. How could a father look at his own son suffering and not pronounce, "The day cursed"? But the old man understands something they don't, that life doesn't move in straight lines or moral labels, and what appears to be misfortune today may reveal itself as protection tomorrow. He refuses to let the moment dictate the meaning, because the Tao never reveals itself through extremes, only through the quiet unfolding between them. So he stands firm, anchored not in denial but in acceptance, accepting that suffering is not a final sentence, only a bend in the path. As the young man is carried inside and the village disperses to spread their verdict of disaster, the old man remains rooted in a peace the others cannot comprehend. He doesn't minimize the pain or pretend the injury doesn't matter. He simply refuses to transform it into prophecy. In the Taoist view, nothing is final, and every loss carries within it the seed of something yet unseen. And so he reminds us, again, how quickly we rush to judge, how easily we suffer before we need to, and how often life asks us only for patience, while its hidden purpose quietly unfolds. Days pass, and the village slowly returns to its rhythm, though the air still carries the echo of recent fears. Then, early one morning, a cloud of dust rises on the horizon, the unmistakable sound of marching boots. The army arrives without warning, armored and grim, announcing a mandatory recruitment of every healthy young man. The village trembles, mothers cry out, doors slam shut in panic. What once felt like a peaceful corner of the world suddenly becomes the threshold of danger, and no one is given time to prepare their hearts for what follows. The soldiers move through the village with cold precision, inspecting each home as if reading fate from the faces of its people. One by one, the healthy boys are taken, boys who had dreams, families and futures that now dissolve into uncertainty. The air fills with wails and pleading, but the army isn't moved. Duty swallows compassion like a stone, sinking into still water. The people watch their sons being led away, the weight of dread settling over them like a dark cloud. For many, this moment feels like the true tragedy, the kind that arrives without explanation. When the soldiers reach the farmer's home, they find the young man unable to stand, his leg still healing from the fall that had caused so much despair. The officer examines him briefly and shakes his head, declaring him unfit for service. In an instant, the misfortune that the village had labeled as a curse becomes the very thing that shields him from a path of bloodshed and danger. The same neighbors who once whispered about bad omens now stare, in stunned disbelief, unable to deny the quiet irony life has revealed. What they once mourned has become protection in disguise. As the army leaves with a trail of stolen futures behind them, the old man remains, as he always has, calm, steady, anchored in a wisdom that doesn't shift with the winds of circumstance. He watches the fading silhouettes of the departing soldiers, and then turns to his son with a gaze filled not with triumph, but with quiet understanding. The village, shaken to its core, finally begins to grasp the depth of what the old man's maybe truly meant. Life's events are never isolated. Each one carries invisible layers, threads woven by the Tao long before we see their purpose. And once again, the truth stands clear. Nothing is ever fully good, or fully bad in the moment it arrives. The village slowly settles after the soldiers disappear. Down the dusty road, yet a strange, heavy quiet lingers behind. People walk home with empty eyes, burdened by the absence of their sons, their future, their peace. And in this silence, something begins to dawn on them, a realization that crawls in softly, almost shyly, as if afraid to reveal its truth too soon. They remember how they labeled the broken leg as pure misfortune, how they whispered about curses when the horses arrived, how they treated every event like a final verdict. Now confronted with the true weight of fate, they finally see how wrong they were about what the moment meant. In the days that follow, the village becomes more contemplative, almost reverent toward the old man's quiet neutrality. People who once mocked his calm now observe him with a mixture of humility and curiosity, wondering how he managed to live so lightly within a world so quick to panic. They begin to notice something they had ignored for years, that the old man never clings to joy or sorrow as if they were absolute. Instead, he treats each moment like a page in a much larger story, trusting that what he sees today is only a fraction of what life intends to reveal. His maybe is no longer strange. It's a doorway to a different way of living. One afternoon, a few villagers gather near his home, discussing how often they've suffered twice, once in the moment, and once again in the stories they created about it. They begin recalling all the times they rushed to judge, only to realize later that they had misunderstood the event entirely. What they once called blessings turned into burdens. What they called disasters became turning points. The young man's injury becomes the example they return to repeatedly, proof that life's hidden architecture is always wider than a single moment of pain. Slowly, They start questioning their own reflex to label everything as good or bad too quickly. As for the young man, he begins to see his father through new eyes, lying in bed, healing day by day. He thinks about how desperately he wished for control, how quickly he believed he understood what each moment meant. Now, spared from the fate of those taken by the army, he realizes how little he truly knew. He watches his father's quiet presence, that grounded, unshakable steadiness, and understands that it wasn't indifference after all. It was wisdom. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't panic, doesn't cling. The kind that trusts the path even when the path is unclear. And as dusk settles over the village, the old man sits outside, listening to the soft movements of life as if they carry secrets he has spent a lifetime learning to hear. He doesn't speak of victory, nor does he gloat in being right. Instead, he remains exactly as he has always been, present, peaceful, aligned with the unseen currents of the Tao. The villagers watch him and finally comprehend the heart of the ancient lesson that life is made not of fixed meanings, but of unfolding truths. And in that unfolding, the wisest thing one can ever say, the thing that frees the mind and protects the spirit, is the very word he has whispered all along, maybe. And before you leave, there's something I want you to carry with you, something simple yet deep enough to shift the way you interpret every moment of your life. True Taoist wisdom lies in observing, not reacting, and trusting that everything simply is. This isn't just a teaching, it's an invitation to stop suffering before the time comes, to allow life to reveal what it truly means in its own rhythm, not in yours. Because peace is born in that space, the space between what happens and the meaning you choose to assign to it. If this story touched your heart, then I ask you for something truly important. Subscribe to the channel right now. We're walking toward our first 1,000 subscribers, and every single person who joins makes a real difference in keeping these daily teachings alive. Hit subscribe and come be part of a community that grows with purpose, depth, and consciousness.